Tonight, we're stepping into the quiet, flickering world of the Ottoman Empire at night, where the cities never truly fall silent, they just change their rhythm. So, before we begin, just get comfortable. Dim the lights a little if you can. Maybe let the room feel a bit softer around you. And as always, if you enjoy these calm history journeys, you can follow along quietly as we travel back in time together. Now, you can let me know where you are listening from by commenting, and if you like it, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Imagine, it's sunset in Istanbul. The golden light is slowly sliding off the domes of mosques, catching for a moment on the Bosporus water before disappearing completely. The city does not rush into darkness. It eases into it, like it already knows the night will be long. From far away, the call to prayer begins to rise. It moves across rooftops, through narrow streets, and over wooden balconies where laundry still hangs from the day. People pause, not because they must, but because the sound naturally slows everything down. In the bazaars, merchants begin closing their stalls. Cloth is folded, wooden doors are pulled shut, coins are counted one last time before being tucked away safely. There is no urgency in their movements. Time here does not feel like something that runs, it feels like something that settles. In the homes, kitchens stay warm a little longer. Stews continue to bubble slowly in clay pots. Bread is still soft from the oven. The smell of cooked onions, meat, and spices drifts out into the cooling air. Outside, lanterns are being prepared, but not yet fully lit. Oil is checked carefully. Wicks are trimmed with steady hands. Every small action feels deliberate, like the night deserves patience. And as the last light of the day disappears behind the skyline, the Ottoman world doesn't become silent, it simply begins its nightlife. Once the sun finally disappears, the Ottoman city does not become dark all at once. Instead, it transitions, quietly, almost respectfully, into a world shaped by lantern light and soft shadows. In Istanbul, the first lanterns begin to glow along the streets near the markets and mosques. Not bright, not overwhelming, just enough to guide the human eye through the evening. One by one, they appear like small floating embers suspended in the air. Stone streets that were loud and crowded only hours ago now feel different under this light. Footsteps sound softer. Conversations drop to a lower tone. Even laughter seems more contained, as if the night itself is listening. Small groups of people still move through the city. A traveler arriving late from the countryside walks slowly toward a nearby inn. A shopkeeper locks his wooden door with a heavy iron key. A child follows closely behind a parent, holding onto fabric as they walk home. Nothing feels rushed. Even the guards stationed near city gates or important roads seem less tense at night. Their movements are steady, repetitive. Watch, pause, listen, repeat. The empire is large, but at night its control feels quieter, more like presence than pressure. In some neighborhoods, you might hear the faint sound of water from a fountain in a courtyard. In others, the distant call of an animal or the rustle of fabric as someone adjusts their shawl against the cooling air. Above everything, the sky begins to open. Stars appear slowly, not all at once. The Ottoman world, with all its cities and villages, seems to exist under the same vast ceiling of darkness. And in this darkness, life does not stop. It simply lowers its voice. People are still awake. People are still moving, but everything now feels closer to stillness than motion. And as the lanterns continue to multiply across the city, the Ottoman night begins to feel less like an ending and more like a second, quieter world beginning to unfold. As the lanterns outside continue to glow softly along the streets, Most people slowly turn away from the night outside and step back into something warmer, home. Inside Ottoman houses, night feels completely different from the streets. Wooden doors close gently, blocking out the cooler air. The sound from outside fades almost instantly, replaced by the quiet, familiar rhythm of family life. In many homes, the main room becomes the center of everything at this hour. A low oil lamp burns in the corner, casting soft shadows on plaster walls. The light is never too strong. It does not try to erase the darkness. It simply shares space with it. Families gather around simple meals. Bread is broken by hand, passed from person to person. Stews that were cooking slowly since afternoon are now served in clay bowls. There is no hurry to eat. Conversations move slowly, often mixing with long pauses. In wealthier homes in Istanbul or Edirne, the evening might include small cups of coffee or fruit brought from distant trade routes. In poorer homes, the meal is simpler, but the rhythm is the same: slow, shared, quiet. Children are usually the first to grow tired. They lean against parents or lie down on mats near the warmth of the room. No one forces sleep. It arrives naturally, like the rest of the night. Outside, the city continues its quiet existence, but inside these walls, time feels even slower. It is almost as if the world has narrowed to just this room, this light, this breathing moment. And as voices lower further, and the oil lamp begins to flicker slightly with the passing hours, the Ottoman night deepens once again, pulling the city gently further into itself. As the oil lamps inside the homes begin to burn lower, the light outside in the streets becomes more noticeable, as if the city is quietly shifting its attention back outward again. The deeper the night grows, the more the Ottoman city changes its rhythm once more. In Istanbul, the main streets near the markets are now mostly empty, but not abandoned. The lanterns still hang from wooden posts and stone walls, swaying slightly in the night air. Their light moves gently across uneven ground, revealing brief moments of texture: stone, dust, worn footsteps from the day before. A few late travelers continue moving through the city, not in groups anymore, but alone or in pairs. They walk slowly, guided by memory as much as light. Most of them are heading toward caravanserais, large resting inns built for travelers and merchants who arrive after long journeys. Inside those inns, the atmosphere is different again. Even at this hour, there is life. Soft voices echo in open courtyards. The sound of horses shifting in their stalls mixes with the quiet movement of servants bringing water or bread. Lamps hang from iron hooks, creating circles of warm light that do not reach every corner. Men from different regions sit in silence or speak softly. Some are traders, some pilgrims, some messengers carrying news that will not feel urgent until morning. At night, even news feels delayed, like the world itself is taking a breath before reacting. Outside these inns, however, the city feels much more still. Only the occasional sound breaks through: wood creaking in the wind, distant footsteps, or the faint call of a night guard changing position along the walls. Above everything, the sky remains wide and calm. Stars appear sharper now, as if the air itself has become clearer with silence. And somewhere between the sleeping homes and the quiet inns, the Ottoman night continues to stretch itself gently forward, without ever truly stopping. As the night settles even deeper inside the caravanserais, the movement inside begins to slow, and even the faint conversations fade into softer silence. Something else quietly takes shape across the Ottoman city. It is the presence of those who do not sleep. Along the outer walls of Istanbul and other major cities, night guards continue their slow, measured patrols. They do not move with urgency. There is no running, no tension in their steps. Instead, their presence feels like a steady rhythm. Watch, pause, listen, continue. Their duty is not only to protect, but to observe. In the dim light of lanterns placed at intervals along stone pathways, they check gates, glance towards empty streets, and sometimes exchange a few quiet words with one another. Most of what they hear at night is not danger, but silence, and learning how to read that silence is part of their work. The city itself feels larger at night. Walls that seemed ordinary during the day now feel heavier, more defining. Gates that were busy with traders earlier now stand closed, their wooden surfaces absorbing the darkness. Occasionally, a lone traveler might still appear, requesting passage or simply trying to reach safety before dawn. The guards respond without haste. Questions are asked calmly. Doors open slowly. Everything moves at the pace of caution, not fear. Inside the city, distant lanterns still flicker in scattered homes and inns, but the overall soundscape is almost gone. What remains is subtle. A dog barking far away, the rustle of fabric in an upper window, the soft creak of wood adjusting to cool air. Even authority at night feels quieter in the Ottoman world. It is not absence, it is reduced volume. Above all this, the sky continues to hold its silent watch. Stars remain unchanged, unmoving, as if they too are part of this system of nighttime observation. And as the guards continue their slow circles around the sleeping empire, the city begins to drift even further into its deepest hour. As the night moves past its deepest point, even the steady footsteps of the night guards begin to feel more spaced out, as if the city itself is breathing slower between each round of patrol. Midnight in the Ottoman world is not marked by a sudden change. There is no clear moment when everything becomes silent. Instead, it happens gradually, almost invisibly, until silence becomes the dominant sound. In Istanbul, most windows are now dark. The lanterns along the main streets still glow, but even their light feels softer, weaker against the vastness of the night. The reflections on stone and water fade into gentle shapes rather than clear forms. Inside homes, families are fully asleep by now. Mats are rolled out or laid flat on wooden floors. Bodies rest close together in the same room, sharing warmth in the cool air. The sound of breathing becomes the only sign of life inside many houses. Yet even in this deep quiet, the city is not entirely still. In certain corners, especially near bakeries or small workshops, there are faint signs of early preparation for the coming day. Bakers may begin checking ovens long before dawn, ensuring the fire will be ready when the first call to prayer approaches. Not full work yet, just preparation, like the future quietly touching the present. Near the water, the Bosphorus reflects the sky so clearly that it becomes difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. Small boats rest motionless, tied securely, rocking only slightly with the water's slow movement. Even sound itself feels different at this hour. Every noise, no matter how small, travels farther. A single footstep can feel like it belongs to a much larger world. And yet, there is no fear in this silence. It is familiar. It is accepted. It is part of how the Ottoman night exists, between activity and rest, between presence and pause. And as the city holds this quiet balance, somewhere beyond the edge of darkness, the first hint of dawn is already beginning to prepare itself, still invisible, but already coming closer. Long before the sky shows any hint of light, the Ottoman city begins to change in ways that are almost impossible to notice at first. It is not a sudden awakening. It is more like a shift in tension, an almost invisible return of movement after the deepest silence. In the narrow streets of Istanbul, a few early figures begin to appear. Not crowds, not rush, just isolated movement. A baker adjusts the fire inside his oven, feeding it carefully so the heat will be ready when the city wakes. The glow from the furnace briefly lights up his face before fading again into darkness. Elsewhere, water carriers prepare their containers. A few workers gather tools for the day ahead. Their actions are quiet, repetitive, almost ritual-like. Nothing is spoken loudly. Even words feel too sharp for this hour. The sky above the empire is still dark, but it no longer feels completely still. There's a subtle shift in tone, deep black slowly blending into the faintest suggestion of blue at the edges, though most people would not yet notice it. In homes, sleep begins to feel lighter, not because people are waking, but because the world around them is slowly preparing to wake first. A child turns slightly in their sleep. An elder adjusts a blanket. Small movements that happen without awareness. Near mosques, caretakers quietly move through courtyards, checking lamps, preparing spaces for the coming call to prayer. The stone under their feet feels colder now, as if the night has reached its final stage. Even the air changes. It feels thinner, fresher, as if the weight of midnight is slowly lifting. Sounds, when they occur, no longer feel fully separate from the silence. They blend into it, as if the city is holding both quiet and sound at the same time. And still, the sun has not arrived. But its presence is already felt in the way the darkness no longer feels endless, only temporary. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the world is preparing to turn again. And the Ottoman night, after carrying so many hours of silence, begins to loosen its grip ever so slightly. Before the first real light appears in the sky, the Ottoman city is already changing again, softly, almost spiritually, as if it has been waiting for this moment all night. The darkness is still there, but it no longer feels absolute. It begins to thin at the edges, especially above the rooftops of Istanbul, where the silhouettes of domes and minarets slowly separates itself from the sky. And then, somewhere in the distance, the call to prayer for Fajr begins. It does not arrive all at once. It rises gently, carried by multiple voices across different neighborhoods, blending into a single flowing sound that moves through the sleeping city like a wave. Inside homes, people begin to stir, not suddenly, not in alarm, but in quiet awareness. Sleep is still present, but it loosens its hold. A hand moves to cover a face. A body shifts from one position to another. The night is ending, and the body knows it before the mind fully does. In the streets, early walkers begin to appear again. Some are heading towards mosques, moving slowly along familiar paths they have walked countless times before. Their footsteps are soft against stone, almost absorbed by the ground itself. Lanterns still burn, but now they feel different. What once guided people through darkness now seems like a bridge between night and morning. Their glow is weaker, not because the light has changed, but because the sky is beginning to answer it. Inside mosques, caretakers and early worshippers gather quietly. Shoes are placed neatly aside. Water is prepared for washing hands and faces. There is no rush in any movement. Everything is done with calm repetition, as if time itself has slowed to match the rhythm of prayer. Outside, the sky continues its gradual transformation. Deep black gives way to soft indigo, then to the faintest trace of gray-blue. It is not yet morning, but it is no longer night in the same way. And as the call to prayer continues to move across the city, the Ottoman world stands gently between two moments, one that is ending
and one that is just about to begin.
As the last echoes of the Fajr call begin to fade into the distance, something subtle happens across the Ottoman city. It is not that the night disappears, it is that it slowly loosens its hold. The sky above Istanbul continues to brighten, not quickly, but in patient layers, dark blue thinning into gray, and then into a pale softness that begins to reveal the shape of rooftops, domes, and distant hills. From the Bosphorus, a faint mist rises over the water. Boats that rested quietly through the night now become more visible, their outlines sharper as light returns. A few early oars move gently, creating small ripples that spread without sound. In the streets, movement increases, but still without urgency. People who woke for prayer now remain outside a little longer. Some sit briefly near mosque courtyards, speaking in low voices. Others begin walking toward their homes or early duties, their silhouettes stretching longer as the light grows stronger behind them. Inside bakeries, ovens are now fully active. The warmth spreads into the surrounding air, carrying the familiar smell of bread that signals the beginning of a new day. This is one of the first true signs that the city is shifting fully from rest to work. Markets, however, are still quiet for now. Their wooden stalls stand closed, waiting, but the anticipation is there. Ropes are being untied, covers are adjusted. Merchants will soon return, each preparing to reopen their small corner of the empire's vast economy. Even the soundscape begins to change again. What was once silence is now layered with early life. Soft footsteps, distant greetings, the occasional creak of doors opening after a long night. Yet even as the day approaches, a faint trace of the night still remains in the air. It lingers in the coolness that has not yet been replaced by sunlight, in the calmness still sitting quietly between movements, in the memory of everything that just passed through darkness. And slowly, without a clear boundary, the Ottoman night gives way to morning, not with an ending, but with a continuation.
By the time most people in the Ottoman city fully open their eyes, the night is already gone, but its softness still lingers in the air like a fading memory. Morning does not arrive loudly here. It spreads gradually, touching rooftops, courtyards, and narrow streets in uneven patches of light. In Istanbul, the first sunlight slips across the Bosphorus, turning the water into a shifting surface of gold and silver. And almost without anyone noticing the exact moment it happens, the city is awake. Not at once, but everywhere. In homes, doors begin to open. Water is carried from courtyard wells. Faces are washed. Simple morning routines unfold with practiced ease. There is no rush in the way people move, even as the day begins to build momentum around them. The smell of fresh bread now travels farther through the streets. Bakeries have become small centers of activity, where early customers gather quietly, waiting for warm loaves to be handed over the counter. Conversations are brief but familiar, greetings that repeat every morning, forming part of the city's rhythm. In the markets, wooden stalls finally come alive. Covers are pulled back, goods are arranged carefully, spices in small piles of color, fabrics folded with precision, metalwork catching the early light. Merchants sit or stand beside their spaces, adjusting, preparing, waiting for the steady flow of customers that will soon begin. Even the sound of the city changes again. What was once silence at night is now replaced by layers of life, voices calling softly across alleys, footsteps becoming more frequent, the distant clatter of carts rolling over stone. Yet despite all this movement, there is still a calmness in the Ottoman morning that feels different from modern rush. Time seems wider, tasks feel slower, life is active but not compressed. And somewhere in the background of it all, the night is still not fully forgotten. It is carried in tired eyes, in slow breaths, in the quiet moments between actions, like a soft echo that follows the city into its day. Because even after waking, the Ottoman world never fully leaves the night behind. As the morning light strengthens over the Ottoman cities, what began as quiet waking slowly transforms into full movement, and the city begins to feel heavier with life in every direction. The markets that were only moments ago just opening their stalls are now steadily filling with people. Not in a rush, but in a continuous flow, like water finding its path through stone channels. In Istanbul, the Grand Bazaar area and surrounding streets become especially active at this hour. Merchants sit behind their displays of goods, now fully arranged and ready. Fabrics hang in layered colors, spices release their scent into the warming air. Metal tools and handcrafted items catch the sunlight in small, sharp flashes. Buyers move slowly between stalls, taking time to look, to compare, to speak. Bargaining is common, but it is not aggressive. It feels more like a daily ritual than a transaction, voices rising slightly, then softening again, always returning to balance. Elsewhere in the city, smaller neighborhoods develop their own rhythm. Women gather in courtyards or doorways, exchanging news from nearby homes. Children begin to appear in the streets, their energy contrasting gently with the calm pace of the adults around them. Caravans arriving from distant regions bring another layer of movement. Dust-covered travelers guide animals through city gates, their journey still visible in their posture and silence. For them, the city is not just home, it is arrival, rest, and exchange all at once. Even the sound of the Ottoman city now feels fully layered. Wheels rolling over stone, vendors calling out softly, distant hammering from workshops beginning their daily work. Each sound exists without overpowering the others, forming a kind of organized noise rather than chaos. And yet, despite all this growing activity, the memory of the night remains faintly present. It lingers in shaded corners where sunlight has not fully reached, in slower gestures of people who have not fully sped up, and in the quiet awareness that the city, only hours ago, belonged entirely to darkness. Now, however, it belongs to the day, and the day, in turn, belongs to movement. As the city settles deeper into the daylight hours, the Ottoman world begins to reveal something that is often hidden during the quiet of night, the full rhythm of its working life. In the workshops scattered throughout Istanbul and other cities, craftsmen are already fully engaged in their daily labor. These are not large industrial spaces, but smaller, tightly organized rooms where skill and repetition define everything. Inside a carpenter's workshop, the sound of wood being shaped becomes steady and familiar. Each cut is measured, each movement practiced. Dust rises gently into the light coming through open shutters, drifting slowly before settling again. Nearby, metalworkers hammer at heated materials, their tools creating a consistent, echoing rhythm. The sound is not chaotic, it is structured, almost musical in its repetition. Each strike is part of a long tradition passed down through generations. In textile workshops, threads are pulled, woven, and aligned with careful attention. Patterns emerge slowly, not as decoration alone, but as a reflection of identity, trade, and craftsmanship. The work is detailed, requiring patience more than speed. Across these spaces, something important connects all workers: the guild system. Artisans are often belong to organized groups that regulate quality, training, and trade practices. These guilds are not just professional associations, they are also communities, shaping how people live and work together in the city.
Outside the workshops, apprentices move between tasks. Some carry materials, others observe silently, learning through repetition rather than instruction. Most skills in this world are not taught quickly. They are absorbed over time through presence and patience. Even in the busiest working areas, there is still a certain calmness. People speak when needed, not constantly. Movements are efficient but not rushed. Time is still respected, not fought against. And while the night once softened everything into silence, the day now shapes everything into structure. Yet somewhere beneath all this steady activity, the memory of night still exists, hidden in pauses between tasks, in brief moments of stillness, in the quiet breath before the next action begins. Because in the Ottoman world, even work carries the echo of night's calm. As the sun climbs higher above the Ottoman cities, the rhythm of work does not stop, but it does soften slightly, like the world is taking a slow, natural pause in the middle of its own movement. By midday, the streets of Istanbul begin to feel warmer, brighter, and more layered with life. Shadows shrink under doorways and archways. The air carries a mix of heat, dust, and food that has been slowly prepared since morning. This is the time when food becomes central to everything. In homes across the city, simple midday meals are shared. Bread remains a constant foundation, torn by hand, never rushed. Alongside it, there are bowls of lentils, rice, vegetables, and sometimes meat, depending on the household's means. Nothing is overly complicated, but everything feels deliberate, shaped by tradition rather than speed. In richer households, the table may include more variety, fruits, sweets, or dishes influenced by the empire's vast trade connections. Spices from distant lands appear quietly in everyday meals, reminding people that the Ottoman world stretches far beyond its cities. Outside, street vendors move through neighborhoods, calling softly as they pass. Small carts carry simple foods, warm pastries, roasted nuts, sweet drinks. People pause briefly, purchase what they need, then continue on with their day. Eating is not an isolated moment here. It is woven into movement itself. In shaded courtyards and near fountains, small groups gather to rest. Conversations become slower again, almost like a return to the night's gentleness, but under daylight. People speak about daily matters, family, trade, weather, small changes in the city. Even animals seem affected by the midday heat. Horses stand still in shaded areas, breathing slowly. Birds rest in corners of rooftops, barely moving except for the occasional shift of wings. And yet, despite the heat and activity, the city never fully becomes still. It only adjusts its pace. Work continues in workshops. Markets remain open. Life flows forward, steady and continuous. But beneath all of it, there is a quiet understanding shared by everyone. The day is long, and the night will return again. As the afternoon settles over the Ottoman cities, the energy of the morning begins to soften again. Not into silence like the night, but into a slower, heavier rhythm shaped by heat and endurance. In Istanbul, the sun now sits higher and stronger, pressing warmth onto stone streets, rooftops, and open courtyards. The bright light that once felt welcoming now carries a weight of stillness, as if the city itself is moving through thick air. Activity does not stop, but it changes form. In the markets, voices become less frequent. Merchants still sit beside their goods, but conversations are shorter now, more practical. Customers move with less haste, often seeking shade between stalls before continuing their purchases. Workshops continue their steady rhythm, though even there, movements feel slightly more measured. Tools still rise and fall, threads are still woven, wood is still shaped, but everything seems to be done with an awareness of the afternoon's quiet pressure. In homes, this is often a time of rest, not always sleep, but pause. People sit in shaded rooms or courtyards where air moves more gently. Water is shared.
Light conversation replaces the busier exchanges of earlier hours. Children may nap or lie still, their energy briefly surrendered to the heat. Older family members rest quietly, conserving strength for the cooler hours that will come later. Outside, fountains and wells become small centers of relief. The sound of water, simple, continuous, feels more present now than voices. It becomes one of the defining sounds of the afternoon. Even animals respond to this slower pace. Street movement reduces. Horses stand in shade. Birds remain still for longer periods, breaking only occasionally into short flight before settling again. Yet even in this quieted rhythm, the city never fully stops. It simply narrows its focus. Life continues in smaller gestures, in slower steps, in patient waiting. And as the afternoon gradually moves forward, something subtle begins to form in the distance. Not a change yet, but a hint of one. The light begins to shift slightly. Shadows start to lengthen again. And without saying it directly, the city begins preparing, once more, for the return of evening. As the heavy afternoon light begins to soften, the Ottoman city starts to change again, almost without anyone noticing the exact moment it begins. The sun is still present, but it no longer feels as intense. Its angle shifts lower, stretching shadows across stone streets and courtyard walls. What was once sharp brightness becomes a warmer, more golden tone, as if the entire city is slowly being dipped into softer light. In the markets, this is when life begins to return in a different way. The earlier quietness of the afternoon fades gradually, replaced by renewed movement. Merchants adjust their stalls once more, refreshing displays that have been sitting under the heat. Fabrics are refolded, goods are rearranged, voices become slightly more frequent again. Customers also return, but now with a different energy, not the urgency of morning nor the slow patience of midday, but a more balanced rhythm, as if people are aware that the day is entering its final phase. In the streets, the color of everything begins to change. Sunlight reflecting off domes, water, and stone takes on a golden tone that feels almost nostalgic, as if the city is remembering something it just lived through. In homes, preparations for the evening quietly begin. Cooking resumes in some kitchens. Fires are gently rekindled. The scent of food begins to rise again, but now it mixes with cooler air drifting in from open windows. Children return to the streets after resting indoors, their energy renewed. Small groups gather again in courtyards or open spaces, talking, playing, or simply sitting together as the day begins to wind down. And even the sound of the city changes once more. It becomes fuller again, layered with footsteps, distant calls, and the soft rhythm of life preparing to shift direction. And yet, there is a calm awareness underneath everything, because everyone knows, without needing to say it, that the day is now moving toward its final chapter, the same way it always does, slowly, predictably, and quietly. As the sun continues its descent, the Ottoman city begins once again to lean gently toward the coming night. As the golden light of late afternoon deepens into orange and soft red, the Ottoman city begins to slow once again, not with exhaustion, but with familiarity, like a rhythm everyone has lived through many times before. The sun lowers steadily over Istanbul, its reflection stretching across the Bosphorus in long, shimmering lines. For a brief moment, the water and sky seem connected, as if the city is suspended between two layers of light.
On the streets, movement becomes more purposeful. People who were wandering or working now begin to think about returning home. The markets still remain open, but there is a sense that they are nearing their final hours of activity for the day. Then, as the sun touches the edge of the horizon, the call to prayer for Maghrib begins to rise. It is gentle, yet unmistakable. The sound spreads across neighborhoods, over rooftops, through narrow streets, and into open courtyards. Conversations pause, hands still. For a moment, everything seems to align with the sound itself, as if the city is taking a collective breath. In homes, lamps are prepared again. Oil is checked, wicks are adjusted, fires in kitchens are carefully tended as evening meals begin to take shape once more. The transition is not abrupt, it is practiced, familiar, and almost comforting. Outside, shadows grow longer quickly now. The shapes of buildings stretch across stone paths, merging with one another as daylight fades. The warmth of the sun is still present in the air, but it is fading fast. In the markets, merchants begin the slow process of closing for the day. Goods are covered, wooden shutters are adjusted, coins are counted one last time, and conversations end with quiet nods rather than long farewells. And as the final edge of the sun disappears beyond the skyline, something shifts in the atmosphere. The city does not fall silent, it transforms. Lanterns begin to glow again, one by one, just as they did the night before. And the Ottoman world once again steps gently back into evening, as if the entire day was only a preparation for this return.
As the last trace of sunset finally disappears beyond the horizon, the Ottoman city does not fall into silence. Instead, it shifts, almost like a living body turning from one side to the other, revealing its night face once again. Lanterns along the streets begin to glow more clearly now. One by one, they awaken the pathways of Istanbul, tracing soft lines of light across stone roads and wooden bridges. The same streets that felt golden and busy only hours ago now carry a different mood, slower, quieter, more reflective. But the city is not empty. It never is at this hour. Movement returns gently. Families step out briefly after evening prayer. Small groups gather in familiar corners, speaking in calm tones. The air feels cooler now, and with it comes a sense of ease that was missing during the heat of the day. In the markets, a second kind of life appears, not the full intensity of daytime trade, but something more relaxed. Late buyers move between a few still open stalls. Vendors call out softly, their voices blending with the sound of footsteps and distant conversations. The urgency of the morning is gone, replaced by a slower, more human rhythm. Inside homes, the evening meal becomes the center of attention once again. Lamps cast warm circles of light onto walls. Food is shared in silence, broken by occasional conversation. The day's fatigue settles gently into the body, not as exhaustion, but as calm release. Outside, the streets begin to feel familiar in a different way, not bright and active like daytime, not deeply silent like midnight, but balanced somewhere in between. A space where people can move without pressure, think without rush, and simply exist. Even the sounds of the city change again. They become softer, stretched out like lingering notes in music. Footsteps that linger a little longer, voices that fade slowly into the air, the distant creak of wood and stone adjusting to the night's cooler temperature. And above it all, the sky returns to its familiar form, dark, wide, and patient. As if it has seen this cycle before, and will see it again. Because in the Ottoman world, night is never just an ending. It is a return.
As the evening gradually fades into deeper night, the Ottoman city begins to settle into a more delicate rhythm, one that feels less like activity and more like presence. Lantern light still lines the streets of Istanbul, but now it feels softer, almost suspended in the darkness rather than pushing it away. Shadows grow longer again, stretching gently between buildings, filling spaces that were once full of movement earlier in the day. The streets are not empty, but they are no longer busy. Instead, they carry a slow, steady flow of people who move with no urgency at all. A few travelers continue their journeys toward inns, their steps guided more by familiarity than by visibility. They have walked these routes before, or they trust those who have. Inside the caravanserais, life continues in a quiet, stable way. Doors remain open in inner courtyards where soft light gathers. Men sit on low benches or mats, resting after long journeys. Some speak in hushed tones, while others simply sit in silence, allowing the stillness to settle around them. Outside, the city's sounds become more spaced out. A distant gate closing, a soft conversation fading at the corner of a street, the occasional movement of a guard completing another slow patrol. Each sound feels more distinct now, not because there are more of them, but because there are fewer distractions to hide them. In homes, most people are already asleep. The rooms are dim, lit only by fading oil lamps or the faint glow of embers. Bodies rest close together for warmth. The pace of breathing becomes the most consistent rhythm in many households. And yet, even in this deep quiet, the city does not feel lifeless. It feels contained, held together by its own silence. Above everything, the sky remains vast and unchanged, filled with stars that seem to watch without interruption or concern. And in this space between waking and sleeping, between movement and rest, the Ottoman night continues to exist, not as a moment, but as a state of being, a pause the entire city learns to share.
At this point in the night, the Ottoman world feels less like a place full of people and more like a place full of stillness that people are resting inside. Midnight does not arrive with any announcement. There is no sound that marks it. Instead, it is recognized only in hindsight, when the city becomes so quiet that even the smallest movements feel distant. In Istanbul, lanterns still burn in a few scattered places, but their light now feels fragile, as if it is only surviving rather than illuminating. Most streets are empty, though not abandoned. They are simply waiting. Waiting for morning, waiting for sound, waiting for movement to return. In the deepest neighborhoods, even the faint signs of activity from earlier hours have disappeared. Doors are closed, windows are dark, courtyards are still. The city's energy, which filled every space during the day, now feels folded inward, like it has been carefully stored away. Yet, silence here is not absolute emptiness. It has texture. A soft wind moves through narrow alleys, brushing against stone walls that have absorbed centuries of similar nights. A distant animal shifts somewhere unseen. A wooden structure creaks gently as it cools. These are not disruptions. They are part of the night's language. In a few isolated places, life continues in the smallest possible ways. A late baker checks the warmth of an oven that will soon be needed before dawn. A guard adjusts his position near a gate. A traveler turns in his sleep inside a caravanserai, dreaming without interruption. Even time itself feels slower here. Not stopped, not frozen, but stretched, as if each minute is longer than it should be. And above it all, the sky remains unchanged, endless, patient, unmoving. It does not judge the silence below it. It simply holds it. And in that holding, the Ottoman city rests, not completely asleep, not fully awake, but suspended in a calm that belongs only to the deepest part of night. Somewhere deep in the stillness, long before any light is visible, the night begins to change again. It is not a sudden shift. There is no clear boundary where midnight ends and dawn begins. Instead, it happens in the smallest possible ways, so subtle that most of the city never notices it happening at all. The air feels slightly different now, not warmer, not brighter, but somehow lighter, as if the weight of darkness is slowly becoming less dense. In Istanbul's quiet streets, the silence remains, but it no longer feels as absolute as before. It feels more like a pause that is starting to stretch toward an ending. Inside homes, sleep continues, but it becomes more fragile. People shift gently in their rest. Some wake briefly without reason, then close their eyes again. Not because anything has changed around them, but because something within the night itself is beginning to move. In a few early places of work, preparation quietly resumes. Bakers check embers once more, making sure the ovens will be ready for the first bread of the coming morning. Water carriers prepare their containers again. These are not full beginnings yet, just readiness, a quiet anticipation of return. Near the mosques, caretakers move with slow familiarity through courtyards and open spaces. Lamps are adjusted. Clean water is placed where it will be needed soon. Everything is arranged without haste, as if the city is gently preparing itself to awaken. Even the sky begins to shift in a way that is almost impossible to see at first. The deep black of night softens at its edges. A faint suggestion of change begins to gather far beyond the rooftops and minarets. And still, no one says it out loud, because the night is not over yet. But it is no longer untouched. It is already on its way back. And the Ottoman world, still wrapped in silence, begins to lean, ever so slightly, toward morning. Before the sky fully changes, before even a trace of sunlight appears, the Ottoman city begins to respond to something invisible but deeply familiar. It starts in the distance, a faint sound, then another, then slowly a rising wave that spreads across neighborhoods, the call to prayer for Fajr. It does not break the silence, it moves through it. In Istanbul, the sound travels over rooftops, through narrow streets and into quiet courtyards where most people are still half asleep. It reaches them gently, like something remembered rather than something new. Inside homes, movement begins again, but slowly. A hand reaches for a blanket. A person sits up, pausing for a moment before standing. Sleep is not suddenly gone. It fades like mist thinning in the early air. The city does not rush into worship or activity. It eases into it. Doors open carefully. Footsteps return to stone streets, but they are soft, respectful, unhurried. People walk toward mosques in small groups or alone, their presence quiet against the vastness of the early hour. Near fountains and washing areas, water becomes part of the ritual again. Hands, faces, and arms are washed in slow, repeated motions. These actions feel almost timeless, as if they belong to every night that has ever passed in this city. Inside mosques, light begins to gather, not from lamps alone, but from the sky itself, which is no longer fully dark. The first hint of blue-gray spreads above the horizon, still faint, still fragile. And in that fragile space between night and morning, something settles over the city. A kind of calm that is different from sleep, different from silence. It is awareness, a shared moment where thousands of lives pause together, even as they begin to move again. Because the night is no longer holding the world, it is releasing it. And the Ottoman city, once again, stands quietly at the edge of a new day. As the Fajr prayer fades into the distance, the sky finally begins to change in a way that cannot be mistaken anymore. Darkness is no longer complete. It thins, it softens, and slowly, over the rooftops of Istanbul, a pale light begins to spread. Not sudden, not dramatic, but steady, as if the world is being gently rewritten in softer colors. The Bosphorus begins to glow again, not with the sharp reflections of midday, but with a muted silver light that moves across the water in slow patterns. Boats that were invisible in the dark now reappear, still and patient, waiting for the day to fully claim them. In the streets, movement increases little by little. People returning from prayer do not scatter quickly. They walk back the same way they came, but now the city around them is changing as they move through it. Shadows shrink, walls regain detail, doorways and windows become clearer, as if the city is remembering its own shape after a long dream. Inside homes, lamps are finally extinguished or left to burn out naturally. Sleep is not always fully finished, but the day is no longer something approaching, it is something already present. In bakeries, ovens are at their strongest again. The smell of fresh bread becomes one of the first signs that the city is fully awake. In markets, shutters are raised more confidently now, and merchants prepare for the full return of activity. Even the sound of the city transforms once more. Footsteps become clearer, voices become more distinct. The layered silence of night is replaced by the structured rhythm of morning life returning to its full form. And yet, there is still a softness in everything. Because this is not just waking, it is transition. A moment where night has not been forgotten, but carried forward quietly into the beginning of another day. And as the sun finally rises higher, touching the domes and streets with warm light, the Ottoman night does not disappear. It simply becomes part of the memory of morning. By the time the sun is fully up, the night already feels distant, almost like something that belonged to another world rather than just a few hours ago. The Ottoman city is now fully awake again. Streets are busy, markets are active, and life has returned to its familiar daytime rhythm. But underneath all of it, there is still a quiet trace of what came before. It is not visible in any obvious way. It is felt. In Istanbul, people move through their morning routines with steady familiarity. Merchants greet customers, workers return to workshops. Boats cross the Bosphorus under a clearer sky. Everything appears normal, structured, and alive. But the night has not disappeared completely. It lingers in small details, in the way some people still move a little slower in the early hours, as if their bodies remember rest even while their minds have returned to work. In the quiet pauses between conversations, in the soft calm that often follows a long night of stillness. The city that was silent only hours ago now feels layered in a different way. Not chaotic, but structured. Not loud, but full. And somewhere in that structure, the memory of night remains, woven into the rhythm of daily life. Because in the Ottoman world, night is not something separate from the day. It is part of it. It shapes how people rest, how they wake, how they begin again. Even when forgotten consciously, it still exists in the background, like a gentle foundation under everything else. As the hours continue forward, the day deepens into its own routine, and attention shifts away from what has already passed. But the cycle is always there, waiting. Because somewhere beyond the brightness of today,
The night is already preparing to return.
As the day moves forward and the city settles into its familiar rhythm again, something quiet remains beneath everything. The shared experience of the night that has already passed, stretching across every street, home, and district of the Ottoman world. It is easy to think of a city as only what it is during the day, the movement, the sound, the activity. But in the Ottoman Empire, night is just as present in shaping life, even when it is no longer visible. Across Istanbul, Cairo, Damascus, and countless smaller towns, people carry the same cycle within them. They wake in darkness, move through silence, and return again to light. Even though they are separated by distance, their nights follow the same pattern under the same sky. And that sky remains constant. Above everything, above markets, mosques, inns, and homes, it is the same vast space that held the stars only hours before. It does not change with human activity. It watches without judgment, without interruption. During the night, that sky feels closer, more personal, as if it belongs equally to everyone below it, regardless of wealth, role, or place in society. A merchant resting in a caravanserai, a baker preparing early bread, a guard on a quiet patrol, a family asleep in a small home, all exist under the same stillness. Separate lives, but connected through the same silence. And even now, as the city is fully awake again, that connection does not disappear. It simply becomes less noticeable, but it remains. In the memory of calm hours, in the body's awareness of rest and return, in the way the world always slows down, no matter how active it becomes. Because in the Ottoman rhythm of life, night is not an interruption. It is a shared pause, a reminder that beneath all movement, there is always stillness waiting. And that stillness belongs to everyone.
And as the day continues forward, slowly losing its sharpness into evening once more, the cycle that has shaped the Ottoman world for centuries begins to turn back toward where it always returns. The sun lowers again over Istanbul, casting long shadows across stone streets and water. The same city that was fully awake only hours ago begins to soften at the edges, as if remembering what it means to slow down. People do not notice the exact moment it happens. There is no clear boundary between day and night, only a gradual change in feeling. Work ends in stages, conversations become quieter, movement becomes less urgent, doors begin to close, lamps are prepared again, not yet lit, but ready. The city knows what is coming even before it arrives. And then as the first lanterns flicker back to life, night returns, not as something unfamiliar, but as something remembered. The streets of the Ottoman world begin to glow once more with soft, warm light. Shadows return to their familiar places. The rhythm of footsteps changes again, becoming slower, gentler, more reflective. Inside homes, warmth gathers, meals are shared, voices lower. The outside world fades into background once more, replaced by the closeness of family and the quiet comfort of enclosed light. Beyond the walls, the city settles into its nighttime form again, not empty, not still in a frozen way, but calm in a way that feels complete. Because this is the part of the cycle that always returns, the part where the world stops rushing, where sound softens, where time stretches, and where everything, for a little while, becomes quieter than it was before. Above it all, the same sky appears once more, deep, endless, and patient, holding the Ottoman world exactly as it always has. And somewhere within that silence, the night begins again, not as an ending,
but as a return to stillness, a place where the world can finally rest.